Hey, my Legion, what's going on? This is Jason Callan. I wanted to do a video about my memories of wrestling from growing up, since I did some other wrestling videos before. I think my first introduction to wrestlers was Andre the Giant and George the Animal Steel, because I remember Andre the Giant from the $6 Million Man when he played Sasquatch, which is Bigfoot. And him and the $6 Million Man, played by Lee Majors, were fighting and stuff like that. I remember Kevin Smith was talking about those comic books. One of the best moments of childhood was the scene where he was fighting, all of a sudden he rips the guy's arm off, and they find out that it was robotic. He was bionic also. The Sasquatch was. It was cool, And that was a big moment because things were so much censored back then. They could show a lot of violence nowadays on TV, but it was a lot different back in the early 70s. And I remember pretty much before we had all the saturation now with all the wrestling. You get a lot of wrestling now. We had like about an hour's worth. I remember in second grade there used to be low budget wrestling. I think it was WWE at WWF before it was WWE. And it was an hour long, and usually it was they'd have a George the Animal Steel match, and then the Wizard would come out, one of the managers. Ivan Putski might be on there, Bruno Sammartino might be on there, and Andre the Giant. And usually with Andre the Giant, he'd have a match with like two little guys, little squirrely guys, and then he'd beat them, or two or three little guys, and he'd beat them and he'd pin them, and that'd be the match. And then in 1979, 1980, wrestling changed. They got a little more elaborate, and Bob Backlund was champion for a while. And then they had, like Superstar Billy Graham and stuff like that. And they really showed in. They really had a bigger budget wrestling when Vince McMahon started taking over. And not too soon afterward, I think whenever Rocky III came out, Hulk Hogan was wrestling in AWA. And Vern Gagne did not want him to be in Rocky III. And he played Thunderlips. And he had like Rocky was supposed to be like this wrestling type boxing match with Hulk Hogan. And I didn't know who Hulk Hogan was at the time. I remember seeing Rocky III. I loved it. I knew who Mr. T was. I didn't know who Hulk Hogan was. But not too long after that, I think the whole world knew who Hulk Hogan was. And then when he got with WWF, it became the Rock and Roll Wrestling Connection, pretty much. That's when the things started to change big time. And before then, I remember my dad and I used to laugh at George the Animal Steel. He used to do stuff like he'd rip the turnbuckles apart and start eating the turnbuckle would be nasty. But he was really funny. And George the Animal Steel was still on there, song with Andre the Giant, stuff like that. And Andre the Giant was always undefeated. That's why it was such a big deal whenever it's still the best WrestleMania moment, in my opinion, whenever Hulk Hogan picked up Andre the Giant and slammed him, and he tore the muscles all off the left or right side of his body, lifted him up, because Andre the Giant gave him almost no health, because his health was failing really bad back in 86, 87. I saw it before coming in the Army. And back to right when they started training Rock and Wrestling Connection. I remember Don Morocco, and remember one time he was eating a meatball sub, and getting in the ring, and he dropped meatballs all over the ring, and Lou Albano was flipping on him and stuff like that. And the rest of the man said, "That's disgusting. That's the worst thing I ever seen." But it was really funny, you know what I mean? And from then, it used to be a more elaborate 1 hour show every week. And then they decided to team up. He was friends with NBC, Vince McMahon, and then they decided to do the main event, which was once a month, every Saturday night. And not too long after that, we got a VCR and stuff like that, and they used to make a whole bunch of very pretty much low budget videos and stuff like that, And if you remember, wrestling started to get a lot bigger. You saw Lou Albano and some other stuff. He was in the Cyndi Lauper Girls Just Want to Have Fun video, and then he was in a movie called Wise Guys, which was really funny. He was funny in that too. But if you see him now, he got really skinny. I don't know if I think he's still around. I don't think he passed away just yet. But I remember him and stuff like that. He was a very colorful character. He wore the rubber bands on his face. I don't know if that, I assume that's before the whole piercing thing took off, you know. I think some other things that happened. Not too soon after that, I remember they started, Vince McMahon decided to go for broke, and he did WrestleMania. And he said, if this idea fails, we're broke. We're bankrupt. And basically it was a real lavish affair. And then, because I remember the night before WrestleMania happened, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, they were the big guys. They were against Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. You know, that was the biggest match of WrestleMania. And they had elaborate matches with, Cyndi Lauper, and she teamed up with female wrestler Wendy Richter, who was a good girl at the time, and to wrestle Moolah, I think it was, for the women's championship. I tell you what, I saw Wendy Richter came back. Anyone who remembers that, boy, Wendy Richter got really heavy. She's very heavy now. Oh well, it happens. And then whenever that happened, you know, it was on closed circuit TV. This is way before pay-per-view or stuff like that. And basically, you'd go to like your Civic Center, and they have like giant screens all around, and you'd pay to watch right on the closed circuit TV. Well, I didn't do that. I waited till about a month or so later, and we rented it. And that was the shortest WrestleMania. It was only 2 hours, and it was broadcast in different parts of the world, and it was a giant success. And from then, they had a year or so later, they had 4 main pay-per-views, because nowadays they have a pay-per-view every month, and then they have other pay-per-views and stuff like that. And I haven't seen them all. It's just too much. I mean, and they're all like $40-50 a piece, and now WrestleMania is $60 on pay-per-view. Really expensive, you know. And what if it's no good? Because sometimes not everyone is created equal. You know, I don't want to pay for something in advance and then be disappointed, you know. It's tough keeping up with the pay-per-views, but back then I kept up with all the pay-per-views, you know. I can't remember, it was, WrestleMania was first, then it was either, the Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series, but that didn't came out until about 87, 88, when I was in the Army, and that's when I started keeping up with those, you know. I remember renting WrestleMania 1, and then, of course, WrestleMania 2 and WrestleMania 3, when Hulk Hogan pinned Andre the Giant. I still think that's the most important WrestleMania moment, you know, because it was such a big deal, you know. I think the best Survivor Series moment was the unveiling of The Undertaker. But I haven't seen anything that impressive since Brock Lesnar came into the WWE. You know, that was a real big deal. That's back whenever Brother Love was his manager, way before Paul Bearer came out. And then when I was in Germany, you know, they'd have just pretty much wrestling and Superstars of Wrestling, and they'd have, but Superstars of Wrestling, it was really weird because it was like 2 months behind from what, I mean, because we lived in Germany, they just had one station that had syndicated programming, or it was a combination program from cable, PBS, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and a little bit of Fox in there too, just a little bit. Yeah, it was something else. But I kept up with all the pay-per-views, and usually when we rented something in Germany, we'd get like a whole case of beer, and me and my roommate and his one friend, and the people next door, because we lived in like co-ed, and I lived next to women, and they came up, what were you guys watching? And we said we were watching wrestling. We drink a whole case of beer in like 2 hours, 3 hours, and watch wrestling. So like, God, oh damn, you guys were low. You know, but that's what happened. That's what we did. And we had a good time and stuff like that. And then when I went to Fort Bragg, there were 3 wrestling shows along with the main event. But then the main event started changing to like a Friday night thing. Friday night for like an hour. And it was only up for a couple months. I don't know what happened. But it was like on Friday night for an hour. And they had, it was Superstars Wrestling. Then all of a sudden Wrestling Challenge came out. And then Wrestling Spotlight, which was pretty much, I think this one UHF channel we had in Fort Bragg. Now, Fort Bragg, I got, you know, the regular channels. I just had Ravages. I did not have cable. I just got the regular channels. Plus, they had a channel 40, which is the UHF station, which just had like syndicated stuff. And they had Wrestling Challenge and Wrestling Spotlight on there. And Wrestling Spotlight was just matches from Superstars and Wrestling Challenge, along with like an interview from a manager or a wrestler, stuff, which was interesting. And that was cool, and I pretty much kept up with that. And then I remember when they had Update, and they had me, Gene Oakland was the main guy, and whenever they go on, they go Update, like that. They call it Update. And one of my favorite tag team wrestlers were the Bushwhackers. I thought they were funny as hell, you know. And I don't think what else happened. So pretty much we kept up with everything, you know. I kept up with all the wrestling and stuff like that. And whenever you saw Hulk Hogan slam Andre the Giant back to WrestleMania 3, you saw that his health unfortunately took a turn for the worse and stuff like that. And he was walking with, he had like a cane or a walker, stuff like that. And then you saw him less and less in Fort Bragg. I remember in Fort Detrick, Maryland, I saw wrestling a few times. It was different. And you only saw Andre maybe a couple times, and not too long, like 2 or 3 years after that, he passed away, unfortunately. But pretty much, before you got the saturation of, it used to be Tuesday Night Titans, which I never saw on USA Network. I saw it once with my grandparents, but we didn't have cable then. And then it switched to Primetime Wrestling, which I started catching up with, which was like the main show. And it was just like, shows, the small matches from just around the world they got from local things. They had a couple matches from the EPA, I remember that, at Civic Center. And that was their main show, and they have like a big comedic thing down there and stuff like that. They remember Reverend Slick used to host, or Bobby Brain Heenan and me and Gene Oakland used to host the show. And then not too soon after that, like in '94, they started having the King of the Ring pay-per-view, and then Raw came out, and then I think most people got out of the WWE for a while because there was a lot of controversy with this man of steroids, and we had a lot of the main wrestlers were going over to WCW, which became really popular for a while, and was beating them in the Monday Night Wars. And then in '97, '98, they started doing the Attitude Era. The Stone Cold Steve Austin, that's when things really started to take off again for WWE. And they started to get a lot of their old fans back. And that's when also they started doing a pay-per-view every month. And then in 2000, they did SmackDown. And then they did some shows, they were still on USA, they did a few more shows. And now they have a ton of shows. It's Raw, Monday night, Wednesday on Ion Television they have Wrestling Challenge, even though most people forget about that show. I'm trying to remember the show, to watch it, so like that. Friday is now SmackDown. It's been going back and forth. It was on UPN, then it was on the My Network, now it's on Sci-Fi. Nice. Saturday morning they have a Saturday Morning Slam, and then at night at 2 in the morning they have the wrestling Raw AM, which is like a recap show.